Have you ever felt like your dreams were just a little too far out of reach? Like they were buried beneath layers of responsibilities, fears, and silent doubts? Maybe you've said things like, "I'll chase my passion when I have more time," or "I'll travel the world when I can afford it." Or maybe you've quietly believed, "People like me don't get to dream that big." If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. We've all been there, stuck in the loop of waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the perfect chance. But here's the truth no one tells us. The most powerful change doesn't come from having more time, more money, or more luck. It comes from changing the way we think. Because mindset isn't just a buzzword, it's the foundation. The way we think shapes what we see, what we believe is possible, and what we're willing to go after. And it all begins with the questions we ask ourselves. Most people ask questions that quietly shut the door before they even try. What if I fail? What if I'm not ready? What if it's too late for me? But what if you changed the question? What if instead of focusing on why it won't work, you asked, how can I make this happen? What's one small thing I can do today? What if I succeed beyond what I imagined? You see, positive thinking isn't about ignoring reality. It's about choosing to look at life through a lens of possibility instead of limitation. It's about awakening the parts of you that still believe, still hope, still want something more. And when you start asking the right questions, when you shift your mindset, you'll be amazed at what begins to unfold. New ideas, new paths, new courage, and most of all, a renewed connection to the dreams you thought you'd left behind. So take a breath, look around, and remember, your life doesn't have to wait. Your dreams don't have to be postponed. Everything can start changing the moment you decide to think differently. Most of us live our lives waiting for the right moment, the right amount of money, the right set of circumstances. We tell ourselves, I'll start when things settle down, or I'll go for it when I'm more prepared. But the truth is, life rarely gives us a perfect moment. Things are always a little messy, a little uncertain, and if we keep waiting for ideal conditions, we might end up waiting forever. That's because we're taught to think in terms of conditions. We believe we need to have certain things before we can do something, before we can be someone. But what if we turn that thinking upside down? What if, instead of starting with what we lack, we started with what we want? This is the power of results-based thinking. It's a mindset shift from what do I have right now to where do I want to go? You begin with the end in mind, the result you truly want, and then you start finding creative ways to move toward it, no matter how limited your resources may seem. Take Mia, for example. She was working a regular 9-to-5 job and barely making ends meet. But she had a deep dream inside her heart, to travel the world and become a photographer. Everyone around her told her it wasn't practical. They said, wait until you save more money, or maybe later when you're more settled. But Mia didn't wait. She didn't have thousands of dollars. She didn't have fancy equipment. What she had was a clear goal and a different question. How can I make this happen with what I already have? So she started small. She took photos in her own city, borrowed a camera from a friend, and shared her work online. She learned everything she could from free tutorials. She offered to do portraits and events for free, just to build her portfolio. She applied for scholarships, travel grants, and even took on remote freelance work to support her trips. And little by little, her world started to expand. 2 years later, Mia was getting paid to do what she loved: travel, photograph, and tell stories. Not because she was lucky, not because she had all the right resources, but because she started with the result and worked backward. This is what happens when you stop asking, what do I have? And start asking, what do I want? And how can I get there? Your brain becomes more focused. You start noticing opportunities you would have missed before. You stop seeing limitations and start seeing possibilities. You don't need perfect conditions. You need a clear vision. Because when you begin with the result, the how starts to reveal itself along the way. Sure, the road won't always be smooth, but it will be yours, and that's what makes it powerful. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, I can't do this because I don't have enough time or money or support, pause. Ask yourself instead, what if I could? What would it look like? What's one small step I can take today to move closer to that dream? This is how transformation begins. Not with everything in place, but with the courage to begin anyway. And when you do, you'll discover that you were never really waiting on the world to change. You were waiting on your own mind to open up. And once it does, nothing stays the same. There's something most people don't realize. You don't need a lot of money to live a full, meaningful life. You don't need 5-star resorts or expensive flights across the world to feel alive. Sometimes, the most unforgettable experiences come from the simplest places, as long as you're willing to look for them. Let me tell you about someone I once met, a guy named Min. He wasn't rich, he didn't have much time off from work. But every weekend he would hop on his motorbike and go somewhere new. Not the popular tourist spots, not the trendy places on social media. He looked for quiet corners of the world, a small lake just outside the city, a forest trail no one talks about, an abandoned railway hidden behind a row of houses. "I can't afford to go far," he once said, "but that doesn't mean I can't go anywhere." With just a few dollars for gas, some snacks, and his old camera, Min would head out, open to whatever the day had in store. No fancy plans, no pressure to impress, just the pure joy of exploring. One day, he stumbled across a hidden waterfall. No signs, no crowds, just the sound of rushing water and sunlight spilling through the trees. It was breathtaking, and all it took was a sense of curiosity and the decision to go. When he shared his photos online, people were shocked. "Where is this? Is this really near the city? And more importantly, how did I never know something so beautiful was so close?" That's the magic. Sometimes we think we need more to enjoy life. More money, more time, more things. But what we really need is to be more present, more willing to explore, more open to simplicity. So stop waiting. You don't have to travel far or spend big to feel something real. Start small. Take a walk somewhere new. Watch the sunset from a different angle. Let yourself feel again, not through luxury but through intention. Because sometimes the richest moments in life don't cost a thing. We've all been there, faced with a dream, a desire, or even a simple goal. And the first thing that pops into our mind is, I can't afford it. I don't have time. I'm not ready. And just like that, the door closes before we even take a step. But what if, instead of shutting down the idea, we stayed curious a little longer? What if, instead of saying, I can't because, we asked, how can I? It sounds simple, but this one question has the power to completely transform the way we move through life. Let me share a story. Emily had always wanted to learn how to play the piano, but she worked 2 jobs, lived in a small apartment, and couldn't afford lessons or even her own instrument. Every time the thought crossed her mind, she'd sigh and say, I wish I could, but I just can't. Until one day, she caught herself mid-thought. Instead of brushing it off, she paused and asked, wait, how could I make this work? It wasn't a demand, it wasn't pressure, it was just curiosity. And it changed everything. She started looking for alternatives. She found a used keyboard online for a fraction of the cost. She downloaded a free app that taught basic chords, and she set aside just 20 minutes a night after work to practice. Within months, she was playing her favorite songs, not because life suddenly gave her more time or money, but because she chose to think differently. You see, when we ask, how can I? Our brain shifts from limitation to possibility. It stops looking for excuses and starts searching for options. You may not have the ideal circumstances, most of us don't, but you'll be amazed by what creativity can unlock when you stop waiting for perfect and start working with what you have. It might mean waking up a little earlier. It might mean trading Netflix time for passion time. It might mean starting smaller than you hoped, but it always means moving forward. Flexible thinking isn't about ignoring reality. It's about navigating it with imagination. It's realizing that obstacles don't mean stop. They mean think differently. So the next time you feel stuck, don't end the thought with, I can't. Pause, breathe, and ask yourself, how can I take one step forward with what I already have? Because most of the time, It's not our resources that limit us, it's our mindset. And the moment you learn to ask better questions, you start creating better answers. Something subtle but powerful happens after the age of 22. Suddenly, you're expected to settle down, to follow a path, to be practical and realistic. You start to hear voices from family, from society, even from inside your own head, telling you what's safe, what's smart, what's acceptable. And slowly, without meaning to, many people begin to shrink their world. They stop trying new things. They stick to familiar routines. They tell themselves that now is the time to be serious, to be stable, and everything else can wait. But here's what no one tells you. If you wait too long to explore who you are and what life could be, you may wake up one day in a life that feels like it doesn't belong to you. Your 20s, especially the years right after 22, are not just a time to work and survive. They're a window of freedom, a season of possibility, a chance to discover the world and yourself before expectations and responsibilities fully close in. And if you don't take advantage of that time, it doesn't just pass, it disappears. It's easy to say, I don't have enough money or I don't have time. But the truth is, you don't need a lot of either to expand your life. What you do need is the willingness to be curious, to step out of routine, to say yes to the unknown. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it feels uncertain. Every time you try something new, every time you stretch just a little beyond your comfort zone, your world gets bigger. You start to think differently. You meet people you wouldn't have met. You uncover sides of yourself that you didn't know existed. And over time, all of that becomes the foundation of confidence, resilience, and identity. The longer you delay experiences, the harder they become to access. The more you wait, the more the world narrows itself around your current habits. And that's how people get stuck. Not because they don't have potential, but because they stopped exploring too soon. So let this be a reminder. Don't wait for everything to be perfect before you live. Don't assume youth will always be there. After 22, every year matters. Every decision counts. You owe it to yourself to explore more, not just the world, but your own capacity, your beliefs, your passions. Your life won't grow unless you do. So keep moving, keep asking, keep becoming, and whatever you do, don't settle into a life that's smaller than what you're capable of living. Confidence doesn't arrive one day like a package at your door. It's not something you magically wake up with or something that's handed to people born into perfect circumstances. Confidence is built slowly, quietly, and powerfully through experience. Real experience. Not reading about it, not thinking about it, but doing, trying, failing, learning, and trying again. You see, a lot of people think they'll finally feel confident when the timing is right, when they earn more, when life calms down, when someone else gives them permission. But if confidence depended on perfect conditions, none of us would ever move forward. Because the truth is, life is rarely perfect. And if you wait for certainty, you'll miss your chance. True confidence doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you've faced, what you've attempted, what you've overcome. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need a lot to begin. You don't need a perfect setup, a huge budget, or a detailed roadmap. You just need the courage to take the first small step, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect. The more you do, the more you realize you can. Every time you speak up, even when your voice shakes, you get a little stronger. Every time you take action despite the fear, you gain proof that you're capable. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It's quiet, steady. It's the knowing that you've been through, and that you'll find a way through the next thing too. And it's not built in the comfort zone. It's built when you say yes to a new challenge, when you try something that scares you just a little, when you move forward even if you're not sure how it'll turn out. That's how you build a foundation no one can take away from you. Not the economy, not a bad day, not a rejection. Because it's yours. Earned through effort. Strengthened by experience. Rooted in action. So if you've been waiting to feel ready, stop. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to begin. Whatever you're dreaming of, start small. Write one paragraph, send one email. Try one new thing this week. You'll be amazed at how quickly confidence grows when you stop waiting and start doing. You don't have to have it all together. You just have to take the next step and trust that each step forward becomes part of the unshakable confidence you're building from the inside out. We've all been taught to think in conditions. If I had more money, then I'd start my own business. If I had more time, then I'd travel the world. If life were easier, then I'd finally chase what I really want. It sounds logical, even responsible. But this kind of thinking builds invisible walls. It places our dreams on the other side of circumstances we don't control. And just like that, we trade possibility for excuses, sometimes without even realizing it. But what if we turned the question around? Instead of saying, if I had haprois, then I would. What if we asked, what do I actually want? And how can I make it possible, starting from where I am? It's a small shift, but it changes everything. Because when you focus on the result, not the condition, your brain stops waiting and starts creating. You begin to think in terms of solutions, not limitations. And suddenly, your goals don't feel so far away. Maybe you can't start a luxury business today, but could you start a simple online shop from your room? Maybe you can't travel for months, but could you book one weekend away using saved-up points or a discount app? Maybe you don't have all the answers, but could you take one step that moves you closer? You don't need perfect timing to make progress. You need a better question. The if-then mindset puts life on hold. It waits for green lights. It hands over power to the things you don't have. But the how can I mindset? That one gives you power back. It invites creativity. It builds momentum. It reminds you that even within limits, time, money, energy, you still have choice. And choice is everything. Some of the most successful ideas in business were born in tiny apartments with no budget, just belief. Some of the most meaningful travels began not with a plane ticket, but with a question. What's possible with what I've got? And some of the most fulfilled people aren't those with perfect lives. They're the ones who stopped waiting and started living. So ask yourself, not if I could, but how can I? Because once you get clear on what you really want, you'll realize you don't need to wait for life to give you permission. You just need to ask the right question and take the first imperfect step. There comes a time in everyone's life when we have to stop waiting for the perfect timing, more money, more confidence, or for life to somehow make everything easier. The harsh truth is, the more we wait, the more life quietly slips by. Most of us don't lack potential. We simply lack the belief that we're allowed to begin right where we are. But the truth is, we don't need ideal circumstances to move forward. What we need is a shift in mindset, a choice to stop seeing limitations as dead ends and start seeing them as starting points. Real freedom begins the moment we stop asking, what's holding me back? And instead ask, what's possible with what I already have? When you shift your thinking from I can't because to how can I, something powerful happens. You reclaim agency. You begin to explore again. You realize that many of the things you thought were out of reach were actually waiting for you to show up, with courage, not perfection. Life doesn't demand that we be fearless. It simply asks that we stop letting fear make every decision for us. You don't need to quit your job, sell your belongings, or take drastic steps overnight. What you do need is a willingness to live more intentionally, to stop playing small just because it feels safe. True confidence and fulfillment don't come from waiting for permission. They come from experience, from trying, stumbling, learning, and continuing. When we give ourselves permission to explore, we stop living on autopilot. We stop letting society or past failures dictate our path. Instead, we begin to live as creators, not just followers. This mindset, this way of thinking, unlocks new paths in business, travel, relationships, and everyday life, even if we have limited time or money. It's not about having more, it's about thinking better. The truth is, life is short. Not just in a poetic sense, but in a very real, ticking clock kind of way. Every day you wait to live fully is a day you won't get back. So don't let fear, doubt, or circumstances keep you from your own story. Don't let your dreams grow dusty on a shelf. Change the narrative. Let your life be shaped not by hesitation, but by action. This is your invitation. To think differently, act boldly, and live more fully. Not later, not when it's easier, but now. In the end, life is short. So don't just exist, live. Live with intention, with curiosity, and with the courage to think differently. If you're ready to shift your mindset and take real action toward the life you truly want, start small and keep going. In the video description below, I've shared a link to one of the best personal development books to help you unlock your potential, break mental limits, and create a life on your own terms. Don't miss it. If this video inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs that extra push today. Thank you for watching and for choosing to grow.